Most people think Mount Etna is harmless because it erupts all the time, a familiar volcano, a predictable one. But that's not what scientists are saying behind closed doors. Over the past few years, something has changed beneath this mountain. Seismic patterns no longer behave normally. Gas emissions don't follow old rules. And parts of the volcano are moving in ways that worry the people who monitor it for a living. Tonight, I'm going to show you why Mount Etna may be entering a phase scientists don't fully understand yet. Not speculation, not fear-mongering, just the real signals coming from inside one of the most watched volcanoes on Earth. Let's begin.
Mount Etna has always been described as restless, active, predictable even. But over the past few years, scientists have stopped using those words. Quietly in research papers and closed-door briefings, the language has shifted. What was once considered a well-understood volcano is now being described as unstable, evolving, and increasingly difficult to forecast. I traveled to Sicily expecting to document one of the world's most monitored volcanoes, a mountain that erupts often, releases pressure regularly, and rarely surprises the experts who study it. What I found instead was a scientific community grappling with data that no longer fits the old models. Mount Etna is Europe's largest and most active volcano. It dominates eastern Sicily, towering over cities like Catania, home to hundreds of thousands of people. For decades, its frequent eruptions were considered a safety feature. Lava flows relieved pressure. Explosive events were usually short-lived. The mountain vented its energy often enough to avoid catastrophic buildup. That assumption is now under review. Over the last decade, Etna's behavior has changed in subtle but important ways. Eruptions have become more energetic. Lava fountains have reached unprecedented heights. Ash plumes have disrupted air traffic repeatedly, sometimes with little warning. And beneath the surface, the volcano's internal plumbing appears to be reorganizing itself. Scientists began noticing the shift when seismic patterns no longer matched historical norms. Instead of tremors rising gradually before an eruption, Etna started producing sudden seismic spikes, bursts of energy that appeared and vanished without clear explanation. Some originated deeper than expected. Others migrated laterally beneath the mountain, suggesting magma was moving sideways, not just upward. One volcanologist described it to me as the system loosening, not calming, loosening. GPS stations installed around Etna tell a similar story. The ground is inflating, but unevenly. Certain flanks swell while others remain stable. This asymmetry is critical. It means pressure is not being distributed evenly inside the volcano. And uneven pressure, in volcanic terms, often leads to structural failure. Etna's eastern flank is of particular concern. It is slowly sliding toward the Ionian Sea, a movement measured in centimeters per year. This isn't new. Scientists have known about the flank's instability for decades. But recent data suggests the rate of movement is accelerating and magma intrusions may be acting as a lubricant, weakening the volcanic edifice from within. In simple terms, the mountain may be slipping. I reviewed bathymetric surveys offshore that show massive landslide deposits from past collapses. These are reminders that Etna has failed before, not explosively, but structurally. And while such collapses are rare, their consequences can be devastating, triggering tsunamis and reshaping coastlines. Gas emissions are another growing concern. Sulfur dioxide output has surged during certain eruptive phases, sometimes exceeding expected levels by a wide margin. More troubling is carbon dioxide. CO2 is heavier than air and can accumulate in low-lying areas. Sudden releases, invisible and odorless, have been linked to fatalities near other volcanoes around the world. At Etna, CO2 emissions fluctuate unpredictably. Scientists debate whether this indicates fresh magma rising from deep reservoirs or a reactivation of older, gas-rich magma pockets long thought dormant. Either explanation suggests a system under stress. One researcher showed me thermal images taken at night. New hot zones appeared where none existed before, fractures glowing faintly beneath the surface. These aren't eruption vents, at least not yet. They are pathways, weaknesses, places where magma might emerge next time, and next time may come sooner than expected. Etna has entered what volcanologists call a high-frequency eruptive phase. Short intervals between eruptions mean the volcano isn't fully depressurizing. Instead of one large release, pressure is being redistributed constantly, sometimes forcing magma into unexpected locations. This increases the likelihood of flank eruptions, events that open suddenly near populated areas with little warning. Catania's airport has been shut down repeatedly due to ashfall. Roads have been buried, farms destroyed. These are treated as inconveniences, temporary disruptions in a region accustomed to volcanic life. But beneath that familiarity lies a dangerous assumption that Etna will always behave the way it has before. Scientists are no longer confident in that assumption. Computer models once used to forecast Etna's eruptions now require frequent recalibration. Variables change too quickly. Magma chemistry shifts between eruptions, gas ratios fluctuate, seismic signals overlap. The volcano is becoming harder to read, not easier. One senior volcanologist told me something that stuck with me. When a volcano becomes unpredictable, he said, it's not because it's doing something new. It's because it's revealing processes we didn't understand before. In Etna's case, those processes appear to involve deeper magma sources feeding the system more aggressively than in the past. Some data suggests magma is rising faster, carrying more gas, increasing explosivity. That aligns with the towering lava fountains seen in recent years. Spectacular, yes, but also dangerous. And then there's the population factor. More people live on Etna's slopes now than ever before. Infrastructure has expanded into areas once considered marginally safe. Evacuation plans exist, but their effectiveness depends on warning time. And warning time depends on predictability. That's where the unease sets in, because Mount Etna is not giving clear warnings anymore. It's giving mixed signals, signals that scientists are still trying to interpret, signals that suggest the volcano is not winding down, but gearing up for something different, something larger, something faster, something less forgiving. And this is why Mount Etna, despite erupting so often, is now being watched with renewed anxiety, not because it's erupting, but because of how it's erupting and what that might mean for the future. The signal scientists don't ignore. What worries scientists about Mount Etna isn't a single data point. It's the convergence of many. In volcanology, isolated anomalies are common. Volcanoes breathe, they shift, they adjust. But when multiple systems begin changing at the same time, that's when concern deepens. Etna is now showing simultaneous changes across seismic activity, gas emissions, ground deformation, and magma chemistry. Taken individually, each could be explained. Taken together, they suggest escalation. Seismic monitoring stations around Etna have recorded an increase in low-frequency earthquakes. These are not the sharp, brittle quakes associated with rock breaking. These are deeper, slower vibrations, often linked to magma movement. They indicate fluid mass pushing through the crust, forcing open pathways that haven't been used in years. More unsettling is where these signals are originating. Some tremors are being detected far below Etna's known shallow magma chambers. This implies new magma is rising from deeper reservoirs, potentially richer in gas and more explosive in nature. Gas-rich magma changes everything. When magma ascends quickly, gases don't have time to escape gradually. Pressure builds, explosivity increases. This is how gentle lava fountains can transition into violent eruptions with little warning. Gas measurements reinforce this concern. Sulfur dioxide levels fluctuate sharply, sometimes spiking without an eruption to relieve pressure. Even more alarming are carbon dioxide ratios. CO2 often escapes before magma becomes visible at the surface. It is one of the earliest indicators of deep magma ascent. At Etna, CO2 emissions have surged at times when surface activity appeared calm. This mismatch troubles researchers. It suggests magma may be stalling underground, pressurizing the system rather than venting safely. Satellite data adds another layer. Interferometric radar imagery shows the volcano inflating and deflating in irregular pulses. Not the slow, steady-breathing scientists expect from a well-regulated system, but abrupt movements that hint at magma injections forcing their way into complex underground networks. Etna's plumbing system is not a single pipe. It's a tangled network of conduits, sills, and fractures. When magma enters that system aggressively, it doesn't always take the same path twice. This unpredictability increases the risk of flank eruptions, events that bypass the summit entirely. Flank eruptions are especially dangerous. They can open suddenly, lower on the mountain, closer to roads, farms, and towns. History shows that these eruptions often begin with little seismic warning. Scientists worry that Etna may be entering a phase where flank activity becomes more common. The eastern flank, already unstable and slowly sliding toward the sea, is under particular scrutiny. Ground deformation measurements indicate that magma intrusions are intersecting zones of structural weakness. Think of it like forcing air into a cracked tire. Pressure doesn't distribute evenly. It concentrates at the weakest point. If a significant intrusion occurs along the eastern flank, the consequences could extend beyond lava flows. A structural collapse, even a partial one, could trigger landslides into the Ionian Sea. While catastrophic tsunami scenarios remain debated, scientists agree that local tsunamis are plausible. Even modest waves could damage coastal infrastructure and ports. Emergency planners quietly model these possibilities, even if they rarely discuss them publicly. Not because panic is inevitable, but because preparation depends on imagining worst-case outcomes before they happen. Another emerging concern involves magma composition. Samples collected during recent eruptions show variations in crystal content and gas saturation. This suggests magma batches are coming from different depths and mixing beneath the volcano. Magma mixing is dangerous. It can destabilize an otherwise steady system. When hot gas-rich magma encounters cooler, more viscous magma, pressure builds rapidly. Many of history's most violent eruptions were preceded by such interactions. Etna's frequent activity once acted as a release valve, but scientists now question whether that assumption still holds. Short, intense eruptions may not be relieving pressure effectively. They may be masking deeper accumulation. One researcher compared it to shaking a bottle instead of opening it. Energy is being redistributed, not released. Adding to the complexity is human development. Over 500,000 people live within areas that could be affected by ashfall, lava flows, or infrastructure disruption. Roads, power lines, and water systems crisscross the slopes. Even moderate eruptions can trigger cascading failures. Ash doesn't need to bury a city to cause chaos. It clogs engines, collapses roofs, grounds aircraft, contaminates water supplies. In recent years, Etna's ash clouds have repeatedly forced airport closures, sometimes with minimal warning. These disruptions are warnings in themselves, signals of how quickly normal life can unravel when the volcano escalates. Scientists stress that Etna is not about to explode tomorrow. That's not the concern. The concern is trend, direction, momentum. Volcanoes rarely announce their most dangerous phases with dramatic signals. They drift into them through gradual destabilization. Etna's recent behavior fits that pattern. More instruments are being installed, more data collected, more simulations run, yet uncertainty remains high. And in science, uncertainty combined with risk is what keeps researchers awake at night. A senior monitoring official told me that Etna now requires constant reinterpretation. Old playbooks don't fully apply. The volcano is behaving like a system in transition. Transition to what? No one can say with confidence. What they do know is this: the signals are real. They are increasing in complexity, and they demand attention. Mount Etna is not becoming quieter. It's becoming harder to understand. And for the scientists tasked with protecting lives beneath its slopes, that may be the most troubling development of all. When familiar warnings stop being enough. Volcanoes rarely fail dramatically without warning. They fail when warnings are misunderstood. Mount Etna's greatest danger may not be its power, but its familiarity. Decades of frequent eruptions have conditioned both the public and authorities to expect disruption without disaster. Lava flows are mapped, ash clouds are managed, flights are delayed, then resumed. Life adapts, but scientists now model scenarios that break from this pattern. Not because Etna is guaranteed to produce a catastrophic eruption, but because the system is evolving in ways that reduce margin for error. One such scenario begins quietly. Seismic activity increases beneath the eastern flank, not at the summit. The tremors are low frequency and scattered, easily dismissed as background noise in an already noisy system. Gas emissions rise, but not dramatically enough to trigger public alerts. Then deformation accelerates. GPS stations detect sudden movement along a known weakness zone. Magma intrudes laterally, forcing rock apart at depth. Within hours, fissures open several kilometers from the summit. Lava erupts close to populated areas with minimal warning. Roads are cut, power lines fail, evacuations begin under pressure. In this scenario, the eruption itself is not the primary danger. The speed is. Emergency plans rely on staged responses. When activity jumps stages without pause, those plans strain. Another modeled scenario focuses on explosivity. Gas-rich magma ascends rapidly from deeper reservoirs. Instead of producing tall lava fountains, pressure builds beneath a partially sealed conduit. The eruption that follows is short but violent. Ash columns rise higher than expected. Wind carries fine ash toward densely populated areas. Roofs collapse under weight. Hospitals struggle with respiratory cases. The airport closes for days, possibly weeks. Ash infiltrates water systems. Agriculture suffers long-term damage. The economic impact extends far beyond the eruption itself. Then there is the scenario scientists discuss most carefully: structural failure. Etna's eastern flank continues its slow movement until magma intrusion destabilizes a critical section. A partial collapse occurs, not as a dramatic avalanche, but as a massive landslide. Material enters the sea. Displacement generates waves that reach nearby coastlines quickly. Not ocean-spanning tsunamis, but enough to damage ports, coastal roads, and low-lying communities. Such an event would reshape how Etna is perceived. It would challenge assumptions about volcanic risk in regions accustomed to manageable eruptions. Scientists do not present these scenarios to frighten. They model them because planning depends on imagination. Because history shows that volcanoes often surprise us at the margins of expectation. What complicates Etna's case is timing. Frequent eruptions blur the line between normal and abnormal. Signals that might trigger alarms at quieter volcanoes are normalized here. This creates a dangerous psychological effect. Familiarity breeds delay. Researchers work against this bias, constantly reevaluating thresholds for concern. They debate how much change is too much, how fast is too fast, when to escalate warnings. Public communication becomes a balancing act. Too many alerts desensitize. Too few risk catastrophe. Behind the scenes, discussions are tense. Because Etna's data no longer behaves like it used to. Patterns break, signals overlap, models disagree, and when models disagree, science becomes cautious. Volcanology is not prophecy, it is risk management under uncertainty. Etna embodies that challenge more than almost any volcano in Europe. What the public often doesn't see is how much of disaster prevention depends on trust. Trust between scientists and authorities, between authorities and communities, between experience and evidence. Etna has earned trust through predictability. That trust is now being tested. The mountain continues to erupt. Lava still flows. Life continues around it. But beneath that surface, normality lies a system in transition, a system adjusting to new inputs, new pressures, new pathways. Whether those adjustments remain manageable depends on variables no one fully controls: depth, chemistry, timing, structure. Scientists are not panicking, but they are watching closely. Because when a volcano stops behaving like the one you know, it becomes the one you prepare for differently. Mount Etna has not changed overnight. It has changed gradually, quietly, measurably. And that may be the most important warning of all. Not a sudden explosion, not a dramatic collapse, but the slow realization that yesterday's certainty may no longer apply. Mount Etna will erupt again. That much is certain. What remains uncertain is how closely the next eruption will resemble the last. Science can reduce risk. Monitoring can buy time. Preparation can save lives. But only if we recognize when a familiar danger is becoming something else. This mountain has spoken for thousands of years. The question is whether we're still listening the right way.